first rule of working in Seoul's underground emergency clinic was simple: never ask questions. The second rule was even simpler: forget every face that walked through that door. Dr. Kang Yohan had followed both rules religiously for 2 years. That was until the night they brought in Shin Haewon, covered in blood and barely breathing. Yohan knew immediately this man was different. Not because of the 3 bullet wounds scattered across his torso. He had seen worse. Not because of the expensive suit, ruined beyond recognition. Wealth meant nothing down here. It was the way 6 armed men filled his clinic within seconds, blocking every exit, checking every corner, moving like trained soldiers rather than panicked friends. And it was the suffocating alpha pheromones that rolled off the unconscious man in waves, so strong that even Yohan's suppressors couldn't block them completely. Yohan forced himself to focus. He had seen gang members before, treated them, saved them, forgotten them. This would be no different, except his hands were shaking slightly as he cut away the blood-soaked shirt, and that hadn't happened in years. One of the men stepped closer, tall with a scar running down his jaw. If he dies, you die. Yohan didn't look up. If you keep threatening me, we'll both watch him die. Get out. The man stiffened. You don't give orders here. Yohan finally met his eyes. In this room I do. Either leave or assist. Choose quickly. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the scarred man nodded once and stepped back. The others followed. The door closed, leaving Yohan alone with a dying alpha and his own racing heartbeat. 2 hours later, Shin Haewon was stable. Barely. Yohan had extracted 2 bullets successfully. The third had been too close to a major artery. One wrong move, and the man would have bled out on his operating table. When Han finally emerged from the surgical room, exhausted and still covered in blood, the scarred man stood immediately. He lives? For now. Yohan stripped off his gloves. He needs real hospital care, proper facility. That's not possible. Then, he might not survive the week. The man's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in his eyes. You'll make sure he does. That wasn't a request. Yohan was too tired to argue. He nodded once and walked toward the small washroom in the back. His suppressors were overheating again, the 3rd time tonight. He locked the door and leaned against the sink, staring at his reflection. Dark circles under his eyes, blood spattered across his collar, and the black medical-grade suppressor around his throat, blinking a faint red warning. Yohan touched it carefully, forcing his breathing to steady. 2 years. 2 years of hiding in this underground clinic, treating criminals and runaways, keeping his head down and his secondary gender buried, all because one mistake had cost him everything. He closed his eyes briefly. The memory tried surfacing: a hospital board meeting, an alpha director's unwanted advances, Yohan's refusal, and then suddenly falsified medical records, an investigation, his license revoked. Nobody believed an Omega over a senior alpha. They never did, so Yohan disappeared. Now he stitched knife wounds in back alleys, and didn't ask why. It was safer that way. When he returned to check on his patient an hour later, Shin Haewon was awake. Yohan stopped in the doorway. The alpha sat upright, despite his injuries, his gaze sharp and fully conscious. Most patients were barely coherent after that much blood loss. This man looked ready to negotiate a business deal. "You're the doctor," Haewon said. It wasn't a question. Yohan stepped inside carefully. "You should be lying down. You removed 3 bullets. 2, Yohan corrected. The 3rd is still lodged near your subclavian artery. I can't extract it here." Haewon studied him for a long moment. "Then I suppose I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything. Just follow the medical instructions and leave when you're stable." Something like amusement crossed Haewon's face. "You're very direct for someone working in a place like this." Yohan changed the IV bag without responding. The alpha's pheromones were more controlled now, but still unbearably strong. His suppressors vibrated faintly in warning. Haewon noticed. That suppressor is failing. Yohan's jaw tightened. It's fine. No, Haewon said quietly. It's not. The way he said it made Yohan look up. For the first time, he met Shin Haewon's eyes directly. They were dark, intelligent, and far too observant. How long have you been hiding? Yohan felt his pulse skip. I don't know what you mean. Haewon leaned back slightly, wincing from the movement. Doctor, with your skill, shouldn't be working in an underground clinic, which means you're either running from the law or running from someone. Yohan said nothing. Both, Haewon concluded. Interesting. This conversation is over. Yohan turned toward the door. Wait. Something in that single word made him stop. When Yohan glanced back, Haewon was watching him with an expression that felt dangerously close to curiosity. What's your name? Yohan hesitated. Then, against every instinct, he answered. Kang Yohan. Haewon repeated it slowly, like he was memorizing it. Thank you, Dr. Kang. For 3 days, Shin Haewon remained in Yohan's clinic, recovering faster than any normal patient should. His men rotated guard shifts outside. Yohan pretended not to notice the weapons or the constant surveillance. On the 4th morning, Yohan entered to find Haewon standing, fully dressed. You're leaving? Yes. You still need at least another week of recovery. Haewon buttoned his shirt carefully, moving stiffly around his bandages. I have stayed too long already. People are asking questions. Let them. Haewon looked at him then, something unreadable in his expression. You don't understand the kind of attention I bring, Dr. Kang. It's safer for you if I disappear. Yohan should have agreed. Should have let this dangerous alpha walk out and never return. Instead, he heard himself say, the bullet is still inside you. Haewon smiled faintly. Then I suppose I'll need a very skilled doctor eventually. He walked toward the door, paused and turned back. How much do I owe you? Nothing. You saved my life. This isn't charity. Haewon reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the medical tray. Yohan didn't touch it. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. Yohan didn't have an answer. After a long moment, Haewon nodded once. I'll remember that. Then he left. Yohan stood alone in the empty room, staring at the envelope. When he finally opened it, there was no money inside. Just a phone number and 4 handwritten words. When you need me. That night, Yohan's suppressors failed completely. The suppressor died at 3 a.m., and Yohan knew immediately he was in trouble. Heat didn't announce itself politely. It crashed through him like a wave, burning beneath his skin and destroying every carefully maintained control he had built over the years. He collapsed beside his bed, breathing hard, trying to reach the emergency suppressants in his medical bag. His vision blurred. The bag was too far away. Yohan's clinic was empty. He always made sure of that, never keeping nurses, never allowing anyone to stay overnight. Now that safety measure became his worst vulnerability. He crawled toward the bag, his body refusing to cooperate. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His mind was fracturing, losing coherent thought. Then his hand brushed against something. His phone. Yohan stared at it for several agonizing seconds. He had deleted Shin Haewon's number the day after he left. Too dangerous, too tempting. But his memory, sharpened by years of medical training, had memorized those digits anyway. His fingers moved automatically. The call connected on the second ring. Yohan. Haewon's voice came through immediately, calm and alert despite the hour. He had saved the number too. Yohan tried to speak, failed. Tried again. Help. 1 word. That was all he managed before the phone slipped from his grip. 20 minutes later, the clinic door slammed open. Yohan barely registered it through the haze. Strong hands lifted him carefully, and that scent, dark cedar and smoke, wrapped around him so completely, he stopped shaking. Haewon, The Alpha's voice was close now. I'm here. Yohan's heat-addled mind latched onto those words with frightening desperation. Every Omega instinct screamed at him to get closer, to let this Alpha claim him, to stop fighting. He hated it, hated how badly he wanted to give in. Haewon carried him to the back room and laid him on the bed. Then, impossibly, he stepped away. Yohan's eyes snapped open. No. The word came out broken. Don't. Haewon crouched beside the bed, his expression tightly controlled. Where are your suppressants? Yohan tried to point. Failed. Medical bag. Left pocket. Haewon found them within seconds. He returned with the emergency injection and administered it with surprising competence. Not his first time helping an Omega through heat. That thought made something ugly twist in Yohan's chest. Jealousy. Ridiculous. The suppressant worked slowly, dulling the worst of the heat, but not eliminating it. Yohan's breathing stabilized enough to think again. When he finally looked up, Haewon was sitting against the opposite wall, as far away as the small room allowed. The Alpha's control was fracturing. Yohan could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Alpha instinct demanded he claim the Omega in heat, but Haewon didn't move. You should leave, Yohan said hoarsely. No. I'll hurt you if you stay. Haewon met his eyes. You won't. That certainty shouldn't have sounded so reassuring. For the next 6 hours, Haewon stayed. He never touched Yohan without permission. Never let his pheromones spike. When Yohan needed water, Haewon brought it. When the suppressant wore off and heat returned, Haewon administered another dose, and when Yohan finally broke down, crying from exhaustion and humiliation, Haewon sat beside the bed and spoke quietly until Yohan fell asleep. When Yohan woke, it was late afternoon. The heat had passed. His body ached, his throat was dry. Shin Haewon was asleep in the chair beside his bed. Yohan stared at him for a long moment. The Alpha looked different like this. Less dangerous. Almost vulnerable. Then Haewon's eyes opened, immediately alert. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck. Haewon almost smiled. That's accurate. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with things neither knew how to say. Finally, Yohan spoke. Thank you for not. He couldn't finish the sentence. Haewon's expression softened. You called me because you trusted I wouldn't. That hit harder than expected. Yohan looked away. I don't know why I called you. Yes, you do. The quiet confidence in those words made Yohan's chest tighten. He forced himself to sit up, wincing. This doesn't change anything. I'm not interested in belonging to an Alpha. Good, Haewon said, because I'm not interested in owning an Omega. Yohan looked at him sharply. Then what do you want? Haewon stood, moving carefully around his still healing injuries. I want to hire you. As what? My personal doctor. I'm serious, so am I. The answer is no. Haewon studied him. You're wasting your skills in this clinic. Treating people who don't appreciate what you do. And you think working for a criminal would be better? I'm not a criminal. Yohan laughed bitterly. Your men threaten to kill me. Dushik has poor social skills. That doesn't change what you are. Haewon stepped closer. What am I? Yohan met his gaze. Dangerous. Yes, Haewon agreed quietly. But I've never lied to you. That was true. Disturbingly true. Every Alpha who had destroyed Yohan's life before had smiled while doing it, had pretended kindness while plotting ownership. Haewon did neither. He was exactly what he appeared to be. Dangerous, powerful, and unnervingly honest. Why me? Yohan asked. There are other doctors, not like you. That's not an answer. Haewon was close enough, now that Yohan could see the faint scar along his collar bone. Because when I woke up with 3 bullet wounds, the first thing you did was yell at armed men to get out of your operating room. You didn't care who I was, you just wanted to save me. Yohan swallowed. That's my job. No, Haewon said softly. That's who you are. The words settled between them like a confession. Yohan wanted to argue, wanted to say no. But part of him, the part that was exhausted from hiding, from surviving instead of living, hesitated. What exactly would this job involve? Haewon stepped back, giving him space again. Medical care for me and my organization. Discreet, professional, well compensated. You'd have full authority over medical decisions. No one would question you, and if I refuse, then I'll leave and never contact you again. Yohan didn't believe that. Not entirely. But the fact that Haewon offered the option mattered. How much? Haewon named a figure that made Yohan's breath catch. That was more than he had made in a year at his previous hospital position. Enough to pay off debts, enough to stop living in fear. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow. Haewon walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Yohan looked up. If you work for me, no one will ever touch you without your permission. That includes me. He left before Yohan could respond. Yohan sat alone in the quiet clinic, staring at nothing. His suppressors were destroyed. His heat cycle was destabilizing, and a dangerous alpha had just offered him everything he needed while asking for nothing in return. It felt like a trap. It felt like hope. Yohan hated that he couldn't tell the difference anymore. Yohan accepted the job 3 days later, and his life changed overnight. Haewon's organization wasn't what he expected. There were no dark warehouses or shady backroom deals, at least not where Yohan could see them. Instead, he found himself in a private medical facility hidden inside a luxury high-rise, equipped with technology most hospitals couldn't afford. His new suppressors arrived the first day, military grade, temperature regulated, and completely undetectable. Haewon had ordered them custom-made. Yohan tried not to think about what that meant. The work itself was surprisingly legitimate. Haewon's people, soldiers, security personnel, corporate employees came to him with injuries ranging from training accidents to occupational hazards. Nobody questioned Yohan's authority. Nobody challenged his medical decisions, and absolutely nobody mentioned his secondary gender. It should have felt perfect. Instead, Yohan felt constantly off balance, and Shin Haewon was the reason why. The alpha was always nearby, but never intrusive. He checked on Yohan between meetings, asked about supply needs, ensured his schedule wasn't overwhelming. Small gestures that felt far too considerate for a man supposedly running a criminal empire. "You're staring," Haewon said one afternoon, without looking up from his paperwork. Yohan blinked, realizing he had been watching the alpha work from across the office. "I'm observing. That's what doctors do." Haewon's mouth curved slightly. "And what have you observed?" "That you're hiding something. Everyone hides something, Dr. Kang." Yohan stepped closer. "The third bullet, you still haven't let me remove it. I've been busy." "You're avoiding surgery." Haewon finally looked up. "Perhaps I don't trust easily. You trusted me with your life already. That's different." "How?" Haewon set down his pen. "Because surgery means being unconscious, vulnerable. And you think I'd hurt you while you're under anesthesia?" The question came out sharper than intended. Haewon stood, moving around the desk. "No. I think you're the only person I would trust in that situation, which is precisely why it terrifies me." The honesty stole Yohan's breath. He had spent years around alphas who performed confidence like armor. Haewon's admission felt dangerously intimate. "The bullet will kill you eventually," Yohan said quietly. "I know." "Then why?" "Because the moment I let you cut me open," Haewon interrupted softly, "I won't be able to pretend anymore." "Pretend what?" "That I don't feel things I shouldn't." The office fell silent. Yohan's heartbeat was suddenly too loud. He should step back, should maintain professional distance. Instead, he heard himself say, "Schedule the surgery. Tomorrow." Haewon searched his face. "Are you sure?" "No," Yohan admitted. "But you need it anyway." Something shifted in Haewon's expression then. Not possession. Something quiet. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of something neither was ready to name. The surgery took 4 hours. Yohan worked with absolute focus, his hands steady despite the weight of what he was doing. Saving this man's life felt different now. More personal. When it was over and Haewon was stable in recovery, Yohan finally let himself breathe. Dushik appeared in the doorway. He lives? Yes. The scarred man nodded once. Good. He's been less insufferable since you arrived. I'd prefer to keep it that way. That was probably the closest thing to a compliment Yohan would ever receive from Haewon's right-hand man. When Haewon woke hours later, the first thing he did was look for Yohan. The Omega was sitting beside his bed, reviewing post-op notes. You stayed, Haewon said, voice rough from anesthesia. Someone needs to monitor you. That's what the nurses are for. Yohan looked up. I don't trust them like I trust myself. Haewon smiled faintly. Now who's the one with trust issues? Fair point. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Haewon spoke again. I meant what I said before, about not pretending. Yohan set down his notes. I know. Does that bother you? Yohan considered the question carefully. 3 months ago, if an alpha had confessed feelings for him, he would have run, built walls, protected himself. But Haewon had never once made him feel trapped. Even now, recovering from surgery, the alpha was giving him space to process. That should bother me, Yohan said finally. It doesn't. Why not? Because you've never asked me to be anything other than myself. Haewon's eyes softened. That's all I want. The words hung between them, honest and undemanding. Yohan felt something inside him crack, not breaking, opening. I'm not ready, he admitted quietly. I know. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Haewon reached out slowly, giving Yohan every chance to pull away. When he didn't, the alpha's fingers brushed against his hand, just touch. Nothing more. Then we'll wait, Haewon said. For the first time in years, Yohan believed someone actually meant that. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. Yohan was reviewing patient files when Dushik burst into his office. Yohan looked up. Medical? Dushik's expression was grim. Personal. Someone from your past is asking questions. Yohan's blood ran cold. Who? Director Ahn Ji-hoon. The name hit like a physical blow. Yohan stood immediately. File scattering. No, he can't. He found out you're working for us. He's threatening to expose your location unless Haewon meets with him. Yohan's mind raced. Ahn Ji-hoon was the alpha who had destroyed his career, who had falsified records, and ruined his reputation when Yohan refused his advances. If he was resurfacing now, it meant danger. Where's Haewon? Already on his way to the meeting. Yohan grabbed his coat. Take me there now. The meeting was set in a private restaurant, the kind where powerful people made deals that never appeared in public records. Yohan arrived just as Haewon was sitting down across from Ahn Ji-hoon. The director looked exactly as Yohan remembered, polished, charming, and utterly ruthless. Then Ji-hoon saw Yohan and smiled. There he is, my missing Omega. Yohan felt Haewon's pheromones spike dangerously. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Haewon's voice was lethally calm. Explain those words, carefully. Ji-hoon leaned back, unbothered. Dr. Kang and I have history. He used to work at my hospital before certain incidents required his departure. Incidents you fabricated, Yohan said coldly. Ji-hoon's smile widened. That was never proven. Haewon stood slowly. This meeting is over. Not quite. Ji-hoon placed a folder on the table. I have evidence of Dr. Kang's Omega status, his falsified beta registration, and his current illegal medical practice. One call to the authorities, and he loses everything again. Unless, of course, we reach an agreement. Yohan's world tilted. Haewon's hand found his shoulder, steadying. What do you want? Ji-hoon's eyes gleamed. Simple. Transfer Dr. Kang back to my employ, and this all disappears. The possessiveness in his tone made Yohan's skin crawl. Haewon's response was immediate. No. Ji-hoon raised an eyebrow. You're refusing? I'm ending this conversation before you say something that gets you killed. The threat was delivered with such quiet certainty that even Ji-hoon hesitated. But he recovered quickly. You can't protect him forever, Shin Haewon. Haewon leaned forward slightly. Watch me. Then he turned to Yohan. We're leaving. As they walked out, Yohan heard Ji-hoon call after them. This isn't over. Outside, Yohan's hands were shaking. He's going to destroy me again. No, Haewon said firmly. He's not. You don't understand what he's capable of. Then explain it to me. So Yohan did. He told Haewon everything. The harassment, the false accusations, the trial that stripped away his license and reputation. Every humiliating detail he had buried for years. When he finished, Haewon was silent for a long moment. Then he made a phone call. Within 3 hours, Ji-hoon's fabricated evidence was exposed. His hospital funding was frozen, and multiple former employees came forward with harassment allegations. By morning, the director was facing investigation, not Yohan. How? Yohan asked, stunned. Haewon looked at him steadily. I told you, no one touches what's mine. That should have frightened Yohan. Instead, for the first time, it felt like protection rather than possession. Maybe, he thought, there was a difference after all.
The aftermath of Ji-hoon's exposure changed something fundamental between Yohan and Haewon. It wasn't dramatic, no grand confessions or sudden revelations.
Just a subtle shift, like a door that had been locked finally opening. Yohan found himself staying later at the office, not because of work, but because Haewon was there. They talked about things unrelated to medicine or business, books, childhood memories, small moments that built intimacy quietly. Haewon never pushed, never demanded more than Yohan was willing to give, and somehow that made Yohan want to give more. One evening, 3 weeks after Ji-hoon's arrest, Yohan entered Haewon's office to find the alpha standing by the window, tension visible in every line of his body. Something's wrong, Yohan said immediately. Haewon turned. His expression was carefully controlled, but Yohan had learned to read the micro-expressions beneath. There's a situation, medical, political. Haewon hesitated. It involves you. Yohan's stomach tightened. Explain. The Omega Rights Council received an anonymous report about an unmarked Omega working in a high-risk environment. They're investigating. Yohan felt cold, spread through his chest. If the council discovered his falsified records, he would face legal consequences. Worse, they might force him into an Omega protection facility. Gilded cages designed to keep unmated Omegas safe, which really meant controlled. I can handle an investigation, Yohan said, trying to sound confident. Haewon stepped closer. There's another option. Which is? Haewon's eyes met his. Mark you, officially. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Yohan's first instinct was to refuse immediately. Marking meant permanent bonding. It meant belonging to an alpha in every legal and biological sense, everything he had fought against. But a quiet voice whispered, it also meant protection, safety, a claim that no council or director could challenge. You don't want that, Yohan said finally. Haewon's laugh was quiet and bitter. You have no idea what I want. Then tell me. For a long moment, Haewon just looked at him. Then he spoke, raw honesty in every word. I want to mark you. I've wanted it since the night you yelled at armed men to save my life. But not like this, not as a legal strategy or protection scheme. If I ever mark you, I want it to be because you chose me, not because you had no other option. Yohan's breath caught. Every alpha he had known before would have used this situation as leverage. Haewon was offering him choice even when it hurt them both. What if there was a third option? Yohan asked quietly. Haewon waited. What if we made it look real enough to satisfy the council, but kept it temporary? A contract bond. They exist in law. Haewon's expression shuddered immediately. No, why not? It solves both problems. Because, Haewon said tightly, I don't want a fake bond with you, Yohan. I don't want to pretend. I'd rather lose you completely than have you halfway. The confession hit like lightning. Yohan stared at him, heart pounding. Then, what do you suggest? Haewon exhaled slowly. I have lawyers working on alternative solutions, protective custody paperwork, employment-based Omega exemptions. It might buy us time, and if it doesn't, then you run, Haewon said, flatly. I'll make sure you disappear somewhere they can't find you. You do that, give up having me here rather than force a bond. Yes. Why? Haewon stepped close enough that Yohan could feel the heat radiating from him. Because your freedom matters more than my wants. Something inside Yohan broke then. Not shattered. Broke open. Before he could second-guess himself, he closed the distance between them and kissed Shin Haewon. The Alpha froze in shock. Then his hands came up, cradling Yohan's face with devastating gentleness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Haewon pressed his forehead against Yohan's. What was that? Yohan's voice shook slightly. Me choosing. Are you sure? No, Yohan admitted. I'm terrified, but I'm choosing anyway. Haewon pulled back enough to meet his eyes. We can still wait. I don't want to wait anymore. Then Yohan said the words that had been building for months. Mark me. Haewon went completely still. Yohan, I mean it. Not because of the council. Because I want this. I want... Haewon searched his face desperately. If I do this, there's no undoing it. I know. You'll be bound to me, permanently. I know. You might regret it later. Yohan reached up, touching Haewon's jaw. Then I'll regret it as someone who made my own choice. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Haewon kissed him again, deeper this time, with years of restraint, want finally unleashed. When Haewon's mouth moved to Yohan's neck, hovering over his scent gland, Yohan tilted his head in submission. The bite, when it came, was pure lightning. Pain and pleasure and connection so overwhelming that Yohan gasped against Haewon's shoulder. He felt the bond snap into place like a lock turning, permanent and unbreakable. When it was done, Haewon held him carefully, scenting him, murmuring things in a language Yohan's overwhelmed brain couldn't process. Finally, the Alpha pulled back. How do you feel? Yohan touched his neck, feeling the fresh mark, terrified, relieved. Yours? Haewon's eyes darkened. Say that again? Yohan smiled despite everything. Yours. The kiss that followed lasted until neither could breathe. Later, curled together on the office couch, Yohan asked the question that had been nagging him. Why did you really do all this? Destroy Ji-hoon. Protect me. Give me choices. Most alphas wouldn't. Haewon's fingers traced idle patterns on Yohan's shoulder. Because 3 years ago, I watched my sister get forced into a bond she didn't want. She took her own life 6 months later. Yohan went still. Haewon continued quietly. I swore then I'd never force that on anyone, even if it meant losing what I wanted most. I'm sorry. Don't be. Haewon kissed his temple. You gave me something I thought was impossible. What? Yohan asked. A bond that feels like freedom. Yohan closed his eyes, feeling the mark pulse with their shared connection. For the first time in his life, belonging to someone didn't feel like a cage. The council's investigation closed 2 weeks later. A mated Omega with a stable Alpha bond didn't require their intervention. Ji-hoon's appeals were denied, and Yohan continued his work with newfound security. But the real victory was smaller. It was Haewon asking permission before sending him. It was lazy mornings, where they forgot about responsibilities. It was the way Haewon still gave him space, even though the bond meant he never had to. One night, Yohan woke to find Haewon watching him in the darkness. What? Yohan mumbled. Just making sure you're real. Yohan smiled sleepily. Very real. Very yours. Haewon pulled him closer. Best decision I never made. What? Not claiming you earlier. Letting you choose when you were ready. Yohan kissed him softly. Best decision I ever made was calling you that night. They fell asleep tangled together, the bond humming contentedly between them. Outside, Seoul glittered with a million lives. But inside that room, two people who had spent years running finally found home. 3 months into their bonded life, Yohan discovered that Shin Haewon had enemies. Real ones. Not corporate rivals or political opponents, but people who wanted him dead. The first attempt happened during a charity gala. Yohan was standing beside Haewon, uncomfortable in formal attire when he noticed something wrong. The waiter approaching them moved differently. Too focused, too deliberate. Yohan's medical training kicked in instantly. He recognized the micro-expressions of someone about to act violently. Haewon, he said quietly. The alpha turned just as the waiter pulled a knife. What happened next was pure instinct. Yohan shoved Haewon aside and the blade meant for the alpha's throat sliced across Yohan's forearm instead. Pain bloomed hot and immediate. Security tackled the attacker within seconds. Haewon caught Yohan before he fell, his face transforming into something terrifying. The ballroom erupted into chaos, but all Yohan could focus on was Haewon's hands on him, checking the wound, his pheromones spiking with protective fury. "You're hurt," Haewon said, voice deadly calm. "It's superficial," Yohan managed. "You took a knife for me, you're welcome." "This isn't funny." Yohan looked at him. "I'm the doctor. I know exactly how not serious this is. Trust me." Haewon's control was fracturing. Yohan could feel it, through their bond rage and fear, mixing dangerously. He cupped the alpha's face with his uninjured hand. "I'm fine. You could have died. But I didn't, and neither did you. That's what matters." Dushik appeared beside them. "The attacker is secure." Haewon didn't look away from Yohan. "Find out who sent him, then make them regret it." The coldness in those words should have frightened Yohan. Instead, he felt oddly safe. This was the other side of Haewon, the dangerous one, the part that protected what was his with absolute ruthlessness. Later, in the car ride home, Haewon held Yohan's bandaged arm with heartbreaking gentleness. "This is my fault," the alpha said quietly. "How my world, my enemies. You're in danger because of me." Yohan leaned against his shoulder. "I knew what I was choosing. That doesn't make it acceptable." Haewon's jaw clenched. "Maybe you should." "Don't," Yohan interrupted. "Don't finish that sentence. I'm not leaving, even when people try to kill you because of me, especially then. Who else is going to keep you alive?" "You're insane." Yohan smiled. "You're just realizing this now?" Despite everything, Haewon laughed quietly. It was a broken sound, but real. Over the next few weeks, Haewon's security measures intensified. Yohan gained a permanent protection detail. The medical facility implemented military-grade surveillance. Haewon became obsessive about Yohan's safety, in ways that would have felt suffocating if Yohan didn't understand the fear beneath it. But the threats didn't stop. A bomb threat at the clinic. Poisoned medical supplies intercepted before reaching Yohan. A suspicious car following him home. Each incident made Haewon more dangerous, more willing to burn down anyone who threatened his omega. Yohan watched the man he loved transform into something darker, and worried. One night, he found Haewon in his office at 3 a.m., surrounded by surveillance reports. When Yohan entered, the alpha looked up with exhausted eyes. "You should be sleeping," Haewon said. "So should you?" "I can't. Not when they're still out there." Yohan walked over and took the reports from his hands. "Talk to me." Haewon was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I can't lose you." "You won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. So we'll be careful and we'll face it together." Haewon pulled him close, burying his face against Yohan's stomach. "I've done terrible things to protect you. I know. Does that bother you?" Yohan ran fingers through Haewon's hair. Ask me if I regret bonding with you. Haewon looked up. Do you? No, not even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous. Because that's when I see who you really are. And who am I? Yohan smiled softly. Someone who loves me enough to become a monster for me. But you're still human enough to hate yourself for it. That's the man I chose. Haewon stood, kissing him desperately. Like Yohan was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, Haewon whispered, I don't deserve you. Good thing I didn't ask your opinion. 2 days later, Dushik identified the source of the threats. A rival organization led by someone from Haewon's past. Someone who blamed him for a business deal gone wrong years ago. The final confrontation happened in an abandoned industrial complex. Haewon insisted Yohan stay behind. Yohan refused. If you're walking into danger, I'm coming with you. You're not a soldier. No, for greed, but I'm your Omega. And I'm not letting you face this alone. Haewon looked like he wanted to argue. Then he simply nodded. The complex was dark and cold. Haewon's team moved like shadows. When they found the rival boss, he smiled. Shin Haewon, finally, and you brought your precious Omega. How considerate. Yohan stayed close to Haewon, feeling the alpha's tension. The rival continued. You took everything from me, my business, my reputation. Now I'll take what you love most. He raised a gun toward Yohan. Everything happened simultaneously. Haewon moved to shield him. Dushik fired first. The rival dropped, weapon clattering. Silence fell like a hammer. Haewon turned to Yohan immediately, checking for injuries even though none of the bullets had come close. I'm fine, Yohan assured him. You're shaking, so are you? They held each other while security cleaned up around them. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The bond said everything. Later, in the safety of home, Haewon broke. He didn't cry, just held Yohan so tightly it almost hurt. I thought I'd lose you. You didn't. I can't do this. Can't do what? Live in a world where you're in danger because of me. Yohan pulled back to look at him. Then it's good we're in this together. Because I can't live in a world without you in it. Either we're both safe or we face the danger together. Those are the only options. Haewon's control finally cracked. He kissed Yohan like he was the only real thing in the world. When they finally made it to bed, exhausted and emotionally raw, Haewon whispered against Yohan's neck. I love you. It was the first time he'd said it aloud. Yohan's breath caught. I know. Say it back. Yohan smiled against his shoulder. I love you too, you terrifying, overprotective alpha. Haewon held him tighter. Yours. Always yours. They fell asleep. Tangled together, the bond glowing, sincere and warm between them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they had each other. And somehow, that was enough. 6 months after the attempt on Yohan's life, Seoul entered early winter. The city transformed into something almost beautiful, cold, but clean. And Yohan found himself settling into a life he never imagined possible. Haewon's organization had stabilized. The medical facility expanded, and their bond had deepened into something that felt less like intensity and more like home. But peace, Yohan learned, was never permanent. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Dushik's voice was tense. We have a situation. Yohan looked up from patient files. Medical family. Your family. Yohan went cold. He hadn't spoken to his parents in 3 years. Not since they'd disowned him after the scan. What about them? Your father had a heart attack. He's asking for you. The hospital was across the city. Yohan made the journey in silence, Haewon beside him. When they arrived, his mother was in the waiting room. She looked older, tireder. When she saw Yohan, her expression flickered with something complicated. Then her eyes landed on Haewon, on the obvious alpha presence, and her face hardened. So the rumors are true, she said coldly. You bonded with a gangster. Haewon's expression remained neutral, but Yohan felt the sting through their bond. He's not a gangster. He's the man who saved me when you abandoned me." His mother flinched. "We did what was necessary. You threw me away the moment I became inconvenient." "That's not. You believed An Ji-hoon over your own son," Yohan interrupted. "You let them destroy my career and didn't even ask for my side of the story. Because you were ashamed of having an Omega child." Silence fell heavy between them. Finally, his mother spoke quietly. "Your father wants to see you, alone." Yohan glanced at Haewon. The alpha nodded once. "I'll wait here." Yohan's father looked smaller in the hospital bed, fragile in a way that made Yohan's medical instincts activate despite everything. The old man opened his eyes when Yohan entered. "You came. You're my patient right now, not my father." A sad smile crossed the older man's face. "Fair enough." They sat in silence for a while. Then his father spoke. "I was wrong." "About what?" "All of it. Believing the accusations, cutting you off, thinking your secondary gender made you weak." Yohan's throat tightened. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I'm dying. And because your mother told me what you've accomplished. A fully operational medical facility, patients who trust you, a bond with someone powerful enough to protect you but respectful enough to wait in the hallway when asked." His father's eyes met Yohan's. "You became everything I wanted for you, just not the way I expected." "I don't need your approval anymore," Yohan said quietly. "I know. That's how I know you don't need me to say this. But I'm saying it anyway. I'm proud of you." The words hit harder than expected. Yohan had spent years telling himself he didn't care, that his parents' opinions meant nothing. But hearing it now, even late, even from a hospital bed, something inside him eased. "Thank you," Yohan said finally. His father smiled. "That alpha outside, he treats you well?" "Yes." "Good. Because if he doesn't, I'm not too old to cause problems." Despite everything, Yohan laughed. Noted. When he returned to the waiting room, Haewon stood immediately. "How is he? Stable? And you?" Yohan considered the question. Better than expected. They left the hospital, hand in hand. Yohan's mother watched them go, her expression unreadable. Maybe one day they'd rebuild that relationship. Maybe not. But for now, Yohan had made peace with it. That night, back home, Haewon found Yohan on the balcony staring at the city lights. "You're quiet," the alpha observed. "Just thinking." "About?" "How much has changed." Haewon stepped beside him. "Regrets? No." Yohan looked at him. "Gratitude maybe." "For what?" "For giving me my life back." "Not the old one?" "Something better." Haewon pulled him close. "You did that yourself. I just gave you space to heal." That's more than anyone else offered. They stood together in comfortable silence. Then Yohan spoke again. "I've been thinking about the future." Haewon tensed slightly. "And I want to expand the clinic. Offer services to Omegas who can't afford proper health care. The ones hiding like I was." Haewon relaxed, smiling. "That sounds perfect." "You'd support it?" "Yohan." Haewon turned him around. "I'd support anything that makes you happy. Even if it's dangerous. Especially then. We've already established I'm terrible at letting you take risks alone." Yohan laughed. "True. What else?" Haewon asked. "What else what?" "What else have you been thinking about our future?" Yohan hesitated. Then, carefully, "Maybe eventually a family." Haewon went very still. "You want children?" "I don't know." "Maybe, someday." "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me," Haewon admitted. "But in a good way." They kissed softly, the bond humming contentedly between them. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of possibility. 2 years later, Yohan's clinic served over 300 Omegas annually. Haewon's organization had shifted toward legitimate business, though he remained formidable when necessary. And on a spring morning, they stood together in a small apartment, looking at adoption papers. "Are you sure?" Haewon asked for the 10th time. Yohan smiled. "Are you?" The little girl in the photo was 7 years old, an Omega orphan, abandoned by parents who couldn't accept her secondary gender. When they met her for the first time, she looked at them with suspicious, guarded eyes. Yohan recognized that look. He'd worn it himself once. Her name was Mina. It took weeks before she smiled at them. Months before she called them family. But the first time she ran to Yohan crying about a nightmare, letting him comfort her, something in Yohan's heart completed. Haewon was a surprisingly gentle father, patient, protective, teaching Mina that alphas could be safe. One evening, Yohan found them together in the living room. Mina had fallen asleep against Haewon's shoulder while he read to her. The alpha looked up when Yohan entered, smiling softly. "Our daughter," he whispered. Exhausting. Yohan sat beside them. "You love it, completely." They stayed like that for a long time. A family built from broken pieces. Years ago, Yohan had been alone, hiding, convinced he'd never be safe. Now he sat in a home, filled with love, bonded to an alpha who chose him every single day, raising a daughter who would never feel abandoned. It wasn't perfect. They still faced challenges. Omega rights, dangerous business rivals, the occasional threat. But they faced it together, and somehow, that made all the difference. On their 5th bonding anniversary, Haewon gave Yohan a gift, a small box. Inside was a key. "To what?" Yohan asked. Haewon smiled. "A beach house. Somewhere quiet, for when you need to escape." "You bought me a house? Consider it an investment in my own sanity. You get stressed, I get worried, we both need vacations." Yohan laughed, kissing him. "I love you." "I know," Haewon replied, "but I never get tired of hearing it." That night, they stood on their balcony like they had years ago. But everything was different now. Better. "You know," Yohan said quietly, "if someone told me 5 years ago this is where I'd be, I wouldn't have believed them." Haewon held him close. "Neither would I, but I'm grateful every day." "For what?" "That you called me that night. That you trusted me. That you chose me." Yohan turned in his arms. "Best decision I ever made." They kissed as Seoul glittered below them. Somewhere in the apartment, Fna slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patience, new adventures. But tonight, they had everything that mattered: love, family, home. And for two people who had spent so long running, that was more than enough. It was everything.